Okay. Okay. Thank you. I can get an answer for you.
Good morning.
Okay.
My name's Thanks. My name's Chris Caius. I'm chairman of the administration committee, and I'd like to call this administration committee meeting to order this morning on Wednesday, April 12th, 2023 at 10:15 a.m. Can we have roll call, please?
Berman,
Here.
Davist, Ford,
Board president.
Gums, and I just asked for your grace this morning because it might take me an extra minute for the mute button. Okay. Young,
Young here.
Juby here, Caius,
Vice President.
Tepe.
Deputy here.
You have quorum?
Okay, well, thank you for being here. I believe the finance reports are on file as usual. Is there anyone here?
Minutes. Sir.
Minutes, sorry, jumped right over and I've got it highlighted here. I will entertain a request to approve the minutes as they were presented from the floor, so.
Board moves.
Okay, is there any objection? Okay, then so done. Finance reports are on file. Is there anyone here for public comment? In person, online, or in writing? I don't believe so. And then we will go, I believe, directly to our report from Rob Linke with our about the Geneva Creek Stabilization Project.
Mr. Chairman, this is Roger. We have Rob Linke. We also have the gentleman that was with the firm that did the actual study for us for the Geneva Creek stabilization, Tom Price. So just quickly before Tom comes up to the podium, they're going to get his presentation ready.
Oh, okay.
It was, months ago that we had done some walkthroughs with the Forest Preserve for the creek. The creek is, just along the tree line out here south of the campus. And there's a creek that runs into the Fox River, and there was some issues with erosion. There's also the grotto that's back there that was from the time when this was the Sacred Heart School. And then so subsequently there was a discussion about what to do to help protect the creek and to try to get control of the erosion, and then potentially saving the grotto from the erosion. So that was kind of the main goal, is what would it take to do that? And so the study was commissioned through an RFQ, and the proposal was approved, and they've been working on that. So they're here today to present basically their recommendation. So I'll ask Tom Price and Rob if he wants to come up, and they can address the committee, and they have a
Excellent.
presentation. Probably move that down.
I think so. All right, yeah, thanks. I think Roger summarized it well. So today what we're hoping to do is we're going to let Tom Price from ECT, he's going to go over the reports, the findings in their report as summarized in this presentation. We've been working on this for a series of several months in that. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tom and let him go through the presentation, and then we'll have time for any questions or discussion after that. Thank you.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Rob. So yeah, we started off on this past last summer and did some field work. And so first we'll talk, this is our agenda, just talk a little bit about what we found, the existing conditions, then what we're trying to achieve with the project, a couple of different alternatives or options for how to improve the conditions that are there, and then the cost of those, and then we can kind of talk from there in terms of what's next. So existing conditions, you were given this packet ahead of time, wanted to kind of give you sort of a summary, but I'm just going to walk through these, so I'm not going to spend any time on this slide. This is what this is the current reach that we are looking at. The red is Geneva Creek on your property, as well as the Forest Preserve property. And then the blue is the upstream areas that are draining into this location. So from various properties in the city of Geneva, and headwaters are more or less at the golf course in terms of the open channel. So this is an exhibit that is that we produce that shows the different conditions along 4 different reaches that were established. And this is very small to read, so there's no expectation you can do that. So instead, I will walk you through what we saw along the way. And then eventually there's gonna be a report from this and you'll have a copy of this exhibit. So this is actually looking upstream of Route 31, kind of just upstream of our reach. And you can see it's a relatively small channel. There's some little bit of armoring along the edges. It's got some, kind of gravelly and sandy substrates, and but it's a small stream. But then it all gets funneled during high flows through this culvert that goes under Route 31. And the large amount of energy as it sort of blasts through that culvert is kind of scoured a hole downstream of that culvert in a very large area. So this is, just downstream, looks like in many ways a very different stream just because of the erosion right at that culvert. As we move downstream, there's a couple of crossings, and as you can see, if you look underneath, there's a foundation that holds up the one end of this pedestrian crossing or path across the creek, and that's being washed out fairly aggressively. And so there's concern about the stability of that bridge, and there's actually been a sign posted to warn people not to look across it. Just downstream of that, this is looking at that same location, but on the top. And a couple of Fridays ago, there were some severe rains that came through and actually went around the bridge. And you can see where, this is scoured out even more so. And even here, that part of the trail has been lost as it's coming around through that bridge. Let's see. Oops, wrong direction, sorry. This is what was formerly the second crossing, and this is failed long ago, but there was essentially a concrete slab that went across here where there was another bridge crossing along the stream. And then just a little further downstream, the creek bumps up against a fairly tall slope here, and that is a quite large source of sediment. If you kind of look closely, you can see that there is this kind of sharp edge right here. And so this slope in this area used to be out where this is here. But when you get the bottom of the slope, the erosion at the bottom, when in these tall slopes, you get large slumps that just fall into the stream. And so this is a large source of sediment that will happen every once in a while. And, and all of this eventually ends up in the Fox River. Moving a little further downstream, here's the grotto, and you can see, probably if you've been down there, but otherwise the trail is like right along the edge here. And so this is last summer, and you can see the trail's already been threatened. It's a fairly large drop off. But if you take a look at this tree right there, this is, 2 weeks ago, it looked like this, and 2 weeks and a couple of days later, that tree looked like that. And so essentially it's fallen in and taken out even more of the trail. You can see right here that the lowest step is kind of out, and the trail is just gone right here. Fortunately, the Forest Preserve was quick to respond and got in there and took out, cut up the tree and cut it out so that any larger events that come through again don't, just get pushed into that same location. This just an example looking at sort of the differences in management of the riparian areas or those overbank areas. On the left is the private property to the south, and you can see that they've been doing a pretty good job. They're leaving the large trees, of course, but taking out a lot of the invasives, the honeysuckle and buckthorn and such. But just on kind of the county side of that property line, all of those invasives are still there. And one, from a natural areas perspective, it's an issue, but also from the standpoint of being able to get good ground flora that helps stabilize the soil and minimize erosion into the creek. it's important from that perspective as well. This is on that private, this is the private fence on the south side of the creek. And as you can see here, the creek is bumping up against and off the county's property and eroding onto the adjacent neighbor's property and taking out their fence. And then finally, as we look at the outlet to the Fox River, and this is actually a Google Maps image, and you can see the quite large sediment delta that is resulting from all of that erosion coming out and is being deposited at the base. So when you get a big events, you get all this material is landing here, and some of it, as the river goes by, is moving it downstream. And then kind of between events, it'll cut itself a new channel through that delta. And what you're seeing right here is mostly sand and gravel that is being taken out of the banks and out of the bottom of the stream. But all that fine sediment that's in the upper banks is continuing to move downstream. And it's the fine sediment that the nutrients, the phosphorus and the nitrogen and some of the other materials are attached to. And all of that then is going into the bottom of the Fox River. And, the county, as well as many of the municipalities, are spending and the state and others are spending a lot of money trying to restore the Fox River. And so this is kind of moving, kind of undoing some of that effort by contributing those materials into the river. So that's what we have. So what are we going to do about it? And so the couple of the primary and secondary goals here, one, just from a public safety perspective, there is some potential threats there with the bridges being washed out and the trail being washed out right by the grotto that is intentionally attracts people, and then protecting the river too. And then secondary goals is to provide a broader restoration of the stream corridor and Geneva Creek itself, and improving the habitat and just general experience for visitors to the site. So we put together two alternatives, and this first alternative is really focused on providing some stabilization of the worst areas. And so that area where we were against that tall slope, that area is being stabilized to prevent that from continuing, that large amount of sediment from washing in, and then also protecting the trail and the bridges, and then actually replacing the bridges. And there's the costs on the edge here. So just the stabilization itself is in the neighborhood of $175,000. And then replacing two bridges is in the range up to $200,000 for the combined two bridges, for a total of $375,000 at these conceptual estimates. And so this is one alternative, kind of the immediate stabilization. If the county so chooses to proceed with a more broader true restoration rather than stabilization, this is depicting what that might look like for the upper reach. So, this would continue all the way down, but it includes some natural channel design that intends to restore some of the pools and riffles, which are the natural habitat conditions that support some of the microorganisms and macroinvertebrates that live in the stream bottom, and then are the what feeds fish and other kind of larger species that we're interested in. And so there'd be more grading that would go with this. There'd be more vegetative stabilization and restoration, removing a lot of the buckthorn and honeysuckle and restoring with more riparian vegetation. And this plan is so that full stream restoration for all the reaches all the way down to the river would be in the range of $700,000. And then the stream corridor, kind of the riparian area, those overbank areas, another $100,000. And then, like before, the two bridges being replaced for $200,000. So this is, around $1 million for this full on project. And it's certainly could be phased, but this is for the full project. And this just gives some terracing to reconnect the stream to its floodplain so that it takes off some of that erosion pressure is what's being depicted here. And then replacing bridges with something like this. And these are prefabricated bridges. The bridges, they're expensive, but you also have to build the abutments at the various ends. And so there's that is what leads to the $100,000 cost of these. And then some of the bank stabilization measures. So on the left is what we call toe wood, but it's essentially stabilizing the toe so that as those high flows come through, it doesn't keep chewing away at the base of the slope and washing away the stream and causing it to kind of further migrate. In this case, it would be to the left. And then also some grade control, which prevents the stream from moving downward. And that's most important right at those bridges. And so putting in what we call, and these can also serve as habitat as well as providing that grade control. And so these are constructed riffles, and riffles are a kind of a natural stream feature. And then an alternative to the toe wood is using stone at the toe of the slope. Does essentially the same thing. It's a little bit more permanent measure, and particularly like around the grotto and things like that, where there's a low tolerance for more movement of the stream. We probably use something like this using the harder, a little bit harder measures, but it's just right at the toe. So you still get a pretty natural shoreline. And then restoring the vegetation on the banks of it on the right photo, that native riparian buffer. And so that is kind of in a short version, the kind of what we found out there, and then, some of the recommendations for improving it. And so the only thing I would say is, recommendation would be is to move forward fairly quickly with the stabilization piece to protect those assets that are already there and to reduce the erosion getting to the Fox River. And then, kind of as funding allows and, both internally and external potential funding, to think about moving on to that sort of full restoration plan. So that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Price. And I'm sorry, welcome too. I should have said it. Welcome. Present. And then now that you're here, and thank you for the presentation, very informative. Do we have any questions from the committee
Mr. Chair,
or like the vice?
thank
Chair?
you. Tepe here. You showed some pictures where one tree fell down and had to be removed. How many other trees like that need to be removed? Are there a couple of others, or?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And so if you ever have an opportunity to go down there, I'd encourage you to go down there and take a look along the trail from the grotto moving up to the west through the county property. Because of the instability of the stream, the stream, that whole corridor has kind of been neglected over, the time that the county's had it. And so because of that, there's been a lot of erosion that's occurred. So we've had many trees that have fallen in. In fact, we have several large ones that came down just in the last two storms we had 2 Fridays ago and this past Tuesday. So that's something that we also wanted to, bring to the attention of the committee and to the facilities department. And that is that there are some large trees that have fallen there that are going to accelerate the erosion that's already occurred. Yeah. And so we're really looking at, we have kind of three different options. Obviously, the first option is to do nothing, in which case things are going to continue to unravel there, particularly at the grotto area, which we know there's a lot of community interest and visitation that occurs down in that area. That's probably the worst area in terms of where it's readily observable and there's an interaction between, public and the stream itself. As you go further upstream onto the county property itself, we have some very bad erosion there. So that's contributing again to that pollution that we're seeing down into the Fox River, the excess nutrients and sediments and things like that. So in our mind, the first option is probably not a wise choice to do nothing. So then the next question comes down to is what level of work would the county want to consider doing there? So like, again, the ECT had prepared kind of a more selective spot treatment type approach to address those areas that are actively eroding versus doing a more comprehensive approach, which, as you saw, is quite expensive, which would really be doing, the entire stream corridor.
Can we go back to those slides?
Trees
Oh.
there was that tall slope that I showed, and you could see there was a couple of trees laying there. And then also so there. and there's
Microphone,
another
please.
example. So those really can.
Mike,
accelerate-
please.
Microphone, go ahead and step up to the microphone if you would, so they can hear you.
Yeah, they can really accelerate the erosion when you get the tree falling in. It
Sure.
actually diverts the flows towards the bank and moves quickly. So keeping an eye on those and getting those out as quickly as you can is.
My second question is, what is the traffic back there? How many people are going?
Yeah, that, Rob, you might be the fourth.
Not counting.
I don't have any numbers on that per se. I mean, I know that the section that is under the King County Forest Reserve, which is the grotto itself. I mean, the grotto is being actively maintained. And if you go down there, there's actually signs down there. They have a Facebook page up there. People are posting pictures. There's kind of a memorial that they have inside the grotto there. So we have Jennifer Rooks Lopez from the King County Forest Reserve is here. So I don't know if she wants to add anything as far as activity down there, or even just ongoing activities that you guys have been kind of coordinating. Cause I know there's been an active group that's been down there doing clearing as well as the upkeep of the grotto area itself. So I don't know if you want to add a few things.
And this is Jennifer Rooks Lopez.
Hi,
Penny.
good morning. So the Knights of Columbus have been maintaining that grotto for a number of years, and they've been doing a lot of restoration work. Like Rob said, if you haven't been down there in the last year or so, just in the last year that I've been with the Forest Preserve, I've seen the grotto has completely gone through a facelift. So it's a very active organization. There's a lot of foot traffic down in that area. As far as people meandering up through the county, I can't really give you any numbers on that. I will say almost every time I go back there, in the summertime at least, I see people back in that area. So it is kind of a popular attraction. I know on the Forest Preserve side, we've tried to make sure that the area stays nice and clear. Like Rob said, when that tree fell the other day, we had staff down there removing that as soon as possible, because the last thing we want to see is to see that shoreline erode even more closer to the grotto than it currently is. There is still a piece I think we have to pull out of there. There's small, I shouldn't say it's small, it's the root ball of the tree that is still actually sitting in the center of the creek. It was a little too wet for our staff to get that hauled out of there when we were doing it. But we will be getting back there to take care of that. But no, it is a site that's very active. It's very popular. Local volunteer group is always out there maintaining it. So
I think that
Mike-
as, I'm going to make one or a couple comments here as because of my history here. I think that we're not actually encouraging any activity, any hiking or pedestrian activity above stream from the grotto, barely access to the grotto because of the nature of and I'll emphasize that we do not have a trail there. It's maybe a path and like a natural path, but we are not
Exactly.
maintaining a trail, neither the Forest Preserve nor the county. And we really aren't encouraging up to this point and have not encouraged for the last year or so since the erosion and we lost what bridges were there, any hiking activity
No.
until at some point, either we bring it back to where there's actually a trail and we authorize that through our safety and whatever else we have to do engineering through Mr. Price's company or whatever. So we're not encouraging people to go back there right now, and we won't be until we actually get a handle on what's going on
Sure.
with that. And that's part of what we're tasked with here as this committee is to decide what we want to do first. And are you on the committee?
Or the grotto?
My third and
Patrick,
final.
Oh, you got more questions?
I had a
Oh,
third and
okay,
final
all
one,
right.
and you kind of gave an interesting lead in, and, I certainly don't want to have this committee tell the Forest Preserve what to do. But, despite your encouraging me to go down there, and I don't think I want to go down there alone, should we close it down from the viewpoint of the county owned part of the property and say that it's unsafe?
So I would say, I would encourage you to go to the grotto. I wouldn't encourage you to go further north. Like
From the
Chris
Forest
said, yes.
Preserve entrance.
From the Forest Preserve interest, yes. So I apologize if I didn't make that clear, that activity right at the grotto is very popular. There are foot trails that run off from that. And even though we don't encourage people to do that, and there's actually a sign back there that says closed for restoration work, you still see some activity. So it is popular. It is technically closed, I think.
It's
from
not
the county
restricted,
side.
but we do not encourage it. It is signed that
Encourage
it
it.
is,
But I would encourage you to go back and take a look at the grotto. You are safe to go there.
well, it's, it's not,
It's not.
ADA accessible.
It is
That
not
going up there,
ADA
and part of that
accessible.
bank is eroded, so.
I'll
Mr.
protect you,
Chairman,
Vern.
Bates, please. Bates, please.
I'll hold your hand.
Thanks, Michelle, but I want the big guy.
I'm gonna go, Madam Bates, did you have a comment or question?
Both. First, I want to thank Rob Linky for bringing this to us months ago. And thank you to our consultant for this great study. I think this is a great quality of life issue for Kane County, that we could add something great to this neighborhood and to the Kane County property. It's even for our employees could use this. I'm sure would be a lovely lunch break for our employees to be able to go a little hike here. And as far as how many people are using it, I'm sure it's a case of build it and they will come, because I will come as soon as it's up there. Are there any
you.
grants available? Have we
Can I
looked into
ask
that?
you to postpone that question until we get our committee's members taken care of? Madam Juby?
Okay, so I have a couple things. First of all, they just ordered benches for the grotto, so I think they're anticipating that when the warmth comes, people were going to be there more. But I have a couple questions. In terms of timelines, if you were to implement, I'm not going to consider option one, which is doing nothing, but the option one that was presented in our, which is just, what was it, just the small stabilization or the bridge repair. What does the timeline look like for that? Like how soon could the work get started and when would it get finished?
Right. Well, I think part of it would depend on the total scope. So right now, the option that that Tom and his company had laid out was to do selective stabilization. over
Right.
Can
the
we go back
entire
to
re-
that slide, please?
Yeah, and that was for approximately I want to say it was about 725 feet or so. Getting there here.
Can we go, are you running it there or,
They can do it from here.
there we go. Keep going up.
Are we going to
The,
Wherever the figures are.
oh, I'm sorry.
Way too far.
Page 51
51.
of the agenda.
Here we go. So yeah, so this was the first option. And so I do want to point out that so this would be basically repairing all of the eroded areas along the stream that are the most severe areas. I guess there would be, in order to answer your question on the timing, this would take a little bit of time. I mean, Tom, if you had to guess, like if we said we were going to go now in order to get permits and to go through that process, I mean, realistically, are we really realistically looking at stabilization next spring and not this fall? Here.
We can do the design work. We need survey and we need some additional information, and then we could do the design work probably over, a couple of months, and that puts us kind of midsummer, but then we got to get permits from the Corps of Engineers and others. And DNR. And so that's where it gets a little less certain. So possibly fall, but probably realistically spring.
And we have the committee process here as well to
Oh.
deal with it for the.
But if we were just starting without going through committee, we'd be looking at perhaps a whole nother year of weather.
Correct.
And it's not going to get better.
Correct.
So if we took a year to get option one in place, option two's figures are going to be changed, correct? So if we are phasing in to eventually get where we have the entire thing stabilized and where it should be, that cost is going to be blown out of the water because we've already had another year of erosion and sediment and trees and damage because of what it would take for us to do the quick fix, correct?
It all depends on.
Yeah.
The actual weather conditions we experience. I mean, it's taken a lot of years to get where it is today. And, but as you can see from the last couple of weeks, a couple of big events can make a big difference. So certainly it could get worse. It's not going to double the cost or anything like
Okay.
that. So,
So we're not looking at it. We still will kind of have a ballpark of what we think it will cost.
And
Okay,
and actually this slide is 175 for stabilization. Is it 150 to 200 for replacing the two bridges? That's an estimate. Is that, so that's a range there? Because I know the three top lines don't add up to the bottom line. So,
Right.
so that's the maximum 375, something like that.
Okay.
Right. I think one other thing to sort of help to answer your question and to consider, and what I was getting at was, you know, they've laid out this first option that is doing select stabilization along the entire reach, which again addresses not just the area where there's the, you know, a lot of visitation at the grotto, but also these other areas where we have erosion further up on the county property that's contributing to the pollution downstream. So in terms of to act with immediacy, another option would be to move forward with getting permits and doing all of this select stabilization as shown in option 1, but to then focus on the area around the grotto, which is straddled between both Kane County and Kane County Forest Preserve. So Kane County Forest Preserve, we've obviously been in discussions with them to look at the feasibility of getting collaborating with them so that they would work on, you know, we would join together, do a joint project where they would pay to fix their side, their section of along the grotto, and then the county would be paying for that other the other area. So that would be kind of like maybe a 1A potentially, with the idea then that once it's permitted, if you didn't do the entire stabilization and you wanted to figure out what you're going to do with bridges and footpath access and those kinds of things, you could do that later as kind of a separate project or a kind of a.
So that would
next
be
step.
addressing the immediate need where we have people and we have the most danger of losing a historical thing, and then buy us time to move on. Okay, that would be my choice.
Because I do think, and going back to the question, there was comments about, you know, closing out the footpaths. I do think we should go down and the county should consider putting at least some additional signage up at the edge where this tree fell down most recently. There is a sign as you come up to the grotto that says trail closed for restoration. As you go off to the left where it used to go along the edge of the creek, and that part of the trail is actually gone. But now the steps coming down off the edge of the grotto on the Kane County side of the property, not on the Forest Preserve, on the county side, that's now gone and it's a sheer drop off. And I think there should be some signage or something, you know, kind of barricading that off.
Okay, and then my last question, because this is costly, what type of grants are available? Do you seek those? Do we have to find them? Who helps us with this?
Right. So there's a number of different potential funding opportunities. So there are certainly grants available through like the Illinois EPA 319. And Tom, I don't know if you want to speak. I know you would put in the draft report. You had a number of different other funding opportunities. One thing to consider though is the county does collect money historically for impacts to wetlands throughout the county. So we have our fee in lieu program. So we've collected money in that account, and that's to be used for the reestablishment of wetlands elsewhere in the county to mitigate for those wetlands that were filled in or destroyed or eliminated due to development, transportation projects and things like that. So the county could take some of that money and put it towards stream restoration, because a stream itself is considered a wetland. So that's an applicable part. Now, the county doesn't have a large amount of funds in that wetland fee in lieu, and that's got to kind of cover the whole county. So we can't put all our eggs in this basket per se, but that could go a long way towards doing the select stabilization, things like that.
Would we be able to get enough just to do the immediate from that, or?
I think potentially we could. So I think
Okay.
the important thing would be to look at, again, trying to string, you know, as we all know, we have limited dollars
Right.
and limited funds. So to try to string it as far along as we could, to try to maybe partner up some of that funding with other funding sources, for example, working with the Forest Preserve for their section. So,
Okay,
yeah,
all right, thank you.
And the Forest Preserve is working collaboratively on this project. So
yes.
It's
It's been
very
very
much
helpful so
so.
far.
Mr. Fonstock, do you have a comment?
Yeah, this is Roger.
Just
Related
add on
to
the
Bryce, just one moment. And I'll,
Just related to the signs, we have put out several signs. I will tell you that, you know, that while there are people that are back there enjoying the path and the trail, there are people that go back there just to
The trail.
vandalize and take signs and throw things. And we've had people that have made improvised paths and, you know, thrown lumber across the creek, which flows downstream, and graffiti and other things. So there is that component of it as well. So we do have people going back there for recreation and good things, but we've probably put up, I think, 3 signs. We've had a couple vandalized and removed even, so we can revisit and look at the signs again and see if we could add a few. But it's a matter of weeks before somebody does something and changes it. But I just wanted to point that out, that there are signs back there that say path closed. The other thing is that, while on the county property, it's, kind of a makeshift path that's been kind of walked over the years. It's government property. We're not a park. We're not a forest preserve, and we're not maintaining a trail or a path there. It's just what has been improvised over the time. And the one thing that was discussed was the bridges, whether or not, you want to encourage and continue the footpath with the bridges, or is that something that would be a better focus for on level ground at the lower part of the property where the circle drive is? And there's already a kind of almost a slight slope graded approach to the grotto. Walking back through the county portion of it to get to the grotto, you cross the creek 2 or 3 times, and it is eroding and, coming apart, and
It's unstable.
yeah. So I think that's something to consider. If you're looking at this, just the stabilization that they have, that's, high interest for us. Putting the footbridges, back in place is secondary to us from the building perspective.
Okay. And then Mr. Price, you had a question?
Yeah, just one comment on the grants. So there's a timeline associated with the grants. And so 319, for example, is historically at least been August when you applied, and then you would find out in spring, again, historically. And this last year, I think that I'm not even sure they've released the money back from last year yet. So there's both an up and a downside to grant. It's free money, or at least 60% free money, but it does take a long time to add to the process. So yes.
It's not something we can.
Chairman?
Now, I have someone back in the back here. Are you with the Knights of Columbus, or? I'm going to allow, if you have some insight for what the Knights are doing down here at the thing, just a short.
Sure. My name's Patrick Murtaugh, and I was first alerted to the issue with the grotto in 2014 when it was vandalized really bad. And a couple of us Knights got together and we started talking about what are we going to do. And it took us until about 2017 to start getting things together. And I think, the community has a lot of interest in this place, and a lot of troubled individuals come there. And yes, they do vandalize it, but it's been about 2 years since we put our cameras up, and there hasn't been any vandalism whatsoever. And so we're really made a lot of improvements.
Can you give us an idea where you are right at this time? Are you planning on putting anything in it at this particular time?
No, just all we're doing is
Just
restoring
misstate-
the mosaics.
Yeah.
And we have 2 individuals, Christine and Valerie, who have, if you've watched the Facebook page, you can see that it's, they do the morphing of the pictures, and you can see it getting better and better and better. And it's quite amazing what they've done. So our goal is just to restore the site and just to try and keep it clean, because they're like you said, some people break some bottles back there, and we just brush the glass away. And that
What was your last name, Patrick?
Murtaugh, Murtaugh.
Okay. Thank you for your input.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate everybody and what you're doing to preserve the grotto. We did do a sealing, so it is going to be good for another 100 years. We've prevented any water incursion. So if we could
Sure that
prevent
doesn't fall into the creek too.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Mr.
Sure.
Murtaugh.
Yeah, Mr. Fonstock, do you have a question?
Yeah. So one of the questions that comes up is related to the path on the county property. There was the original stages of the cross that went down that path. That's why
Right.
people walk it. None of the monuments or I guess the attractions are gone. They're
Right.
just concrete bases.
Oh, those
Is there
were,
any intention of,
those were stations of the
Yes.
cross, and we're not
not going to go?
doing
that?
anything with those. you know, me personally, my mom she said the stations every day since she.
That was one of our
So,
questions, was
yes,
whether
I'd
that
love to
was.
see them restored, but I think that's a long-term plan.
That's not your vision right
Okay.
now as the
Right.
next. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Anybody else on the committee have questions about this? I guess I have one for Mr. Price or Rob. When we're talking about that, these are the first project you're talking about is stabilization very quickly. And that is definitely linked in so that it's not two separate projects. If we do the first one, we can very smoothly move on to the next one, which would be the more costly one.
Yeah, the first one, I mean, maybe there's 3 stages now. Just getting down there, moving some of the trees that have fallen in just in the last couple of weeks that may be diverting flows into the banks. And that's just, somebody with chainsaws and such getting down there. But the first, the option that's presented in the plan that's shown up there now is just stabilizing the most, kind of severe locations to reduce erosion. And then, yes, moving on to the other option, this could be the first step of moving into that next option.
Okay, thank you. I guess, did you mark any of the trees? I guess mark any of the trees that should be removed other than the ones that had right there at the. It was.
No, we haven't. And again, I think that was something that, Roger and I have yet to discuss
So that'd be
here.
something between
Yeah, and
staff.
we can talk
Okay,
about that as
okay.
far as kind of the
In-
immediacy of getting. it
included
in.
with Ms. Brooks Lopez over there.
Yes, right. In
so-
terms of actually removing the most important part, the critical section would be to actually remove the trees that have fallen down into the creek itself. Like as Tom said, they're diverting water into the banks and then further exacerbating the erosion. So that's kind of like the first thing. And then the next thing then would be is after we turn in the report would be, I guess, to get some determination from the committee as far as what we would want to do as far as expenditure of funds for doing any of the stabilization work itself. Again, it sounds like, some iteration of this option one stabilization work seems like that's kind of the direction we're headed, just given the cost of full restoration. And again, as you had asked Tom, and he had indicated that that's work, then that full restoration is stuff that could be done at a later date if the opportunity and funding ever came about.
Any questions from or comments from the board members then, or for anything? No? Okay. Then I'm guessing what we have to decide with this committee, which is establishing policy, is to how we want to address this, that we want to go ahead with salvaging and stabilizing this. And then possibly bringing back a resolution with some potential for funding with funds that we have already, because we don't have grant money, obviously, lined up. And you can work with Rob on that. And Mr. Berman.
I think that stabilization is the most important part of it. I think we can forego the bridges at this point in time, and they could be added in the future if we really deem them necessary, improvement of the property. But stabilization is where we want to go, I think, in the beginning.
And I think we've gotten some input from Ms. Bates and others about just how important this could be. At this current time, it's not, we don't address this as a asset to be visited, but I think I would take a consensus from the committee to proceed with this at post haste before we have another big watershed event and lose.
Mr. Chairman Ford,
Mr. Ford.
yeah, I would agree with the stabilization of it.
So we can just put this to staff to
I think
on
the next step would be for us to get basically a plan set or a bid put out or for the purposes of doing the stabilization project. And that would give us actually the costs. We could also be working on the collaborative budget. How would we fund the estimated cost? But we won't know the actual cost until you would get the bid. So this would just be a budget estimate. We have not done a actual bid or RFP.
Sure.
And there isn't, I don't believe we have any plan set either. So we'd have to get a plan and a bid out.
Yeah, that's correct. This was just a phase one report. So this was just an assessment. As Tom had indicated, this wasn't preparing the, the engineering plans and specifications necessary for that was.
So
planning
we'd
the
have to
whole-
get that out to bid?
The question would be, do we want to pay to develop the actual plan for the bid? And we would set up a budget to do the plan. And then that plan would get put out for bid. And then when it comes back, the board would decide if they want to execute the plan and the funding mechanism
So
to
we
do
put
that.
out the plan, then we would vote on that in our next meeting? Is that,
I don't think you'd get it back in time for the next meeting. As far as the plan and the bid documents, I think it would take probably 2 months.
so we just direct you to get started on that?
That would be something we could get started with Rob.
And the committee is able to do that without running it through all the way up to the top?
We would first request a proposal for the engineering and development of the plan. That would be our first request.
Okay, from this committee, from this committee.
Yes.
Okay.
If I may just jump in,
Sure.
this is a great opportunity to possibly visit the idea of a design build, which would really skip that final engineering step and it would make the process go a little bit faster. So we would like to leave it open to the opportunity to discuss with building management that type of approach for this project to move it along swiftly and potentially save us some money as well.
That sounds good. Faster and cheaper. Geez,
It's fine.
tough choice. That sound good to the committee?
Yeah.
All right, I'm getting nods, so.
Faster and cheaper sounds real good.
Yeah. Finance chair says yes. So
We'll get
That-
started on that.
then that's the marching orders without being any more formal than that this morning. We're good to go on that. Well, great.
Okay with that.
Excuse me, Mr.
Mr.
Kraus, David
Mr.
Young.
Young, yes?
So just being new to this whole thing, I am all for the restoration and doing the first steps to get that stabilized. Is there a motion that needs to be presented by somebody to go forward with this, or can we just go ahead and have this
So
I
move
think
forward?
without a formal resolution or something on the agenda, we can't vote for it according to Robert's rules, but that's what the consensus would be. That's what I'm getting from Rogers, that all we require is a consensus from the committee to get this thing rolling.
Okay, so that's how that would work. We would just need to, as a
Yeah,
group.
and Roger can explain that a little bit more.
So typically for capital funding, we would initiate a project to get approval to pursue the planning. And that would authorize us to get architects and engineers and do the planning. So we would want to do that if we're planning to use the capital fund for that. If we can get the actual design build request for proposals out without engaging an architect and an engineer in the design build request for proposal, there's no requirement to use capital funds to do that. So you'd be okay to do that as long as you're using staff time, getting the design build request for proposals out. And at that point, you'd get the results of that, which would be a project plan and a cost and a statement of work and a schedule. So I think that's where we're at. Usually with larger capital projects, we would come and initiate the project, which would be asking for the dollars to pursue a plan, pursue an architect and an engineer to design the plan. And then we would take it out, do the actual request for proposals or bids. And then we would bring it back to approve of the contract to actually execute. So that's kind of our process.
So we're going to sidestep that and go with the.
We'll
design
work
build
with Jody and Rob to try and come up with that and try to see if we can do the design build concept that's acceptable to us. But if we want to engage architects and engineers and use capital dollars, we'd want to initiate it and develop an actual plan set.
How much do you think that would slow this down? I'm concerned that we haven't any more water.
I definitely agree with Jody that if we can do that, we can make it happen faster and it might save you some money. So
Okay. All right.
we'll try that.
So then we were all nodding on that. We'll go for that. Any other questions? Committee or non-committee? Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Price, and thanks, Rob. And thanks, Jennifer, for coming in. It looks like a good team to move ahead. And thanks for the suggestion Jody. For design build.
Good job.
Excellent. Okay, and then, actually, I didn't ask the committee if I could change, but I guess I changed the agenda already.
No,
We-
you can't.
We covered. Some people are just trouble. We'll go back to then our executive director's report, Roger Fonstock, and item 6.
Okay. This is Roger Fonstock from IT and Building Management, and conveniently, because of Mr. Young's question, we actually covered one of the slides almost, so that's good. Some of this is repeat of last time, but this is just some of the things that we're working on still between IT and Building Management. Most of these has not changed. There is an item at the top, which we were going to do a demonstration, but we need to get a little bit more progress on it. We are implementing a product called Contract Safe to manage the county's contracts, and it also does the notifications and messaging. We're going to implement this in IT and Building Management and work with the purchasing department and other departments eventually to manage all the county's contracts in this software solution. We've done a number of different ways of tracking contracts over the years, and it's gone from, shared network drives to websites to spreadsheets and folders and everything else. This is going to give us a more comprehensive way of managing the contracts and having visibility with anybody that wants visibility. It also gives us good notification and messaging, so we can get early notification of contracts that are expiring, 6 months ahead of time, 3 months at a time. And it'll allow you to set up the messaging by groups, and we can send out notices to purchasing, to finance, to whoever would like to know what contracts are coming due. It also builds like a register and roster of contracts that are coming due. So you can see during the year what's coming up that year, and also understand better the costs associated with that when you're trying to budget. So we've been reviewing this for about a month. We started putting some contracts in it, but we could do a demonstration of this. I think you'd find it interesting how we can manage contracts better. And this came out of some of the review that IT and Building Management have been doing, trying to manage all the different contracts that they do have, and working with purchasing. Karen Keitzman from purchasing, we've talked to her about it, and I think she would agree that the better we manage the notification of contracts coming due gives us more time to prepare, and hopefully we'll have fewer things that would come due and be in a rush to try and get them renewed. So that's something that we're going to be bringing back. We'll try to do a short demo, show you how it works. Hopefully in May we'll have that for you. The budget performance, I think this is for IT. We're still running, more in printing supplies and fuel for vehicles. That didn't change from last month. We're at 33% of the year, so we're 4 months in. So you should, expect your spending at the 4 months or 33%. But overall, we're at 25% of the budget with 33% of the year. So we're still 8% under at 4 months, actually, I should say. But, collectively, again, we have the items for printing supplies, which we buy a lot of supplies in advance of the printing. And then fuel for vehicles is a reimbursement that we pay to buy fuel. So we pay that basically after it's consumed. And that might be changing because we're going to be using WEX cards. Or are we going to switch that out?
Yeah, we're fully on the WEX cards now.
So our costs for that will be coming in through invoices through WEX cards for the vehicles, as opposed to reimbursing the sheriff for fuel. So the other budget, Building Management, is a little bit more dicey. We're at 33% of the year, and we've done a lot of repairs and maintenance. Henry and his staff have been busy with the roads, building services and equipment. And we also have spent a lot of money on vehicles that were approved. You can see that the numbers in those categories largely front loaded for the year at 84% and 68% between buildings and equipment. That's an indication that we're doing a lot of work. We're getting a lot of things repaired, a lot of things maintained and fixed. I think Brent and Matt from Building Maintenance have been trying to get on top of as many issues and problems as they can. which we're encouraging them to do. I mean, we're trying to get them to address as much as they can. And we told them that we would be bringing this back mid-year to try to discuss where we project being at the end of the year, or if we needed to request any money for a budget adjustment. They did have an equipment rental. I think that was primarily a lift to do some work that they had to do. And that was over budget. It was just the price of that project to get it rolling. And then general printing is a little bit over, but all in all, we're trying to maintain the buildings and get ahead of some of the things that maybe we're behind. If you look at overall, we're at 43% for contractual with 33% of the year, or 10% over at 4 months in. So the one thing that does happen every year is we do mid-year projections at 6 months with finance, and we'll kind of forecast where we're going to be at the end of the year. And that's really where we try to determine what we can do to get back into our budget, or do we need to start talking about cutting back, or do we need to try and figure out if the county wants to continue to fund more maintenance projects? That'll happen in the next 2 months. Overall, we're in good shape. If you look at the bottom right corner, total budget, we're at 27%. So we're 6% under at 4 months overall. That takes into account the personnel, contractual, and commodities. So collectively, we're under by 6%, which is good. I would tell you that I think some of that is the difference in utilities. We have a large contractual budget for utilities, which is electric, water, and gas, and some of those may change as we go into summer and we start to cool all these big buildings. So I don't know if that will hold true as we go into the summer months, but that's what we're looking at right now. We're 6% under at 4 months and about 168,000 under in terms of dollars for the first 4 months. So if you were to look at it right now and project it out, and if all things held the same, you'd be projecting 500,000 under. Again, I don't think that'll hold true for summer as you see the electric bills start to increase. But we do have the solar field coming on, so that might be a net change as well. So if you look at the capital projects, a lot of the capital projects are spinning up. We're getting those started. You're going to see that you still have computer software and automotive equipment that were an early purchase. There were some one-time purchase of software, and then also the budget adjustment for the vehicles that were purchased by state's attorney and building management. The total budget's at 15% with 33% of the year. So we're 18% under at 4 months. That's probably doesn't mean a lot because the capital projects are just getting started up with the spending. Again, going back to the methodology, and this is the one I was saying, Mr. Young had asked about how do we do this? I think this is important. We're trying to stick to this as best we can. So every project's going through certain phases, and this is standard project management. So we initiate the project, and that's really to get the committee and board support for the project, to spend money on the planning, to spend money on getting plan sets, bid documents, engineering, architects. So unless we get that support for the resolution that's on the agenda today, we're not going to engage architects and engineers to go spend your money on something that the board is not initiating. So this is today you have a resolution that initiates a group of projects, and it also describes the projects that were ongoing and in different phases from last year that are still continuing. So we initiate in committee and we get approval of the projects. And at that point, we have a cost estimate, whether it's for architects, engineers, or if it's design build, it could be the entire project is estimated. After we get that, we go from the committee approving of the initiation to the planning, which is where you take the actual architect, engineering staff. We build a plan set and a bid document. We get purchasing involved and state's attorney. And we try to get a proposal that we can present to the board for the award and the authorization to enter the contracts. And that's where you get into the execution of the project. We get into execution. We're signing the contracts. We're working on the statement of work, the cost, the schedule for the project. And then you get into, monitor and control, which is essentially change orders for us. Are we changing the scope of work? Are we changing the schedule? Are we changing the costs? Final part of this is closing, and you'll see this in the next slide. When we're closing, we're finishing out the final pay apps, making sure all the work was completed, getting all the documentation, following up to make sure that if there's any warranty or other repairs that we need done, that we'll get that. And then ultimately, you have the final payout that we need to do to finish the contract. But that's kind of the basic approach to project methodology that we're trying to follow. And we're putting this into documentation and forms that we can try to work with so that we'll have, the actual process for staff to follow, and they can be relatively concise about doing these things. So this is what the capital projects looks like. And on the left side, you'll see initiation, planning, execution, and closing. And then if you look at this table, about the third column, you'll see phase, and it's telling you which part of the phases we're in. And all the ones that are at the top, one, initiation, those are all new. Those are all things that we're starting in 2023 right now. And they're associated dollars that were in the budget for these things. So this will be things that we're putting together plans, putting together bids, putting together the RFPs, or they may be things that we already know the price for. We're just going to execute. So they'll go into execution. But we're seeking the approval of the list of 23 items for us to begin that work. All of these items come back to the board in the form of a proposal with an authorization to enter into an agreement with a vendor or with contractors to do the work. This is just saying, go forward with the planning so that we can get to that point. We're doing this in response to some of the things that happened maybe in the past, where you had architects, engineers, things were engaged, dollars were spent, and then the board was informed about, this is a plan, we're going to execute this project. We want to make sure that the board is on board with the project before we initiate architects and engineers, before we spend a bunch of money for plans, and then tell the board that, hey, this is a project we want to do and it costs this much. So this is just a way to do it in two phases, essentially. You initiate it with the board, and then you actually authorize the agreement with the board. So that's what we're trying to accomplish. You'll see the resolution in the packet. We'll go over that with Henry for the capital projects. But if you have any questions about the projects, we could go through those if you'd like. A lot of them are still, like I said, we're authorizing them to do the planning. We have in the current project budget, 5.2 million in this list. The capital budget for this year was 7.5 million approximately. So there's 2.2 million that's not in this list that will be brought forward at a later date. So, but the projects at the top are the ones that we would be initiating today. The ones at the bottom, you'll see that have the 2- planning. Those are the resolutions that initiated those projects. They were done, a lot of them were done in resolution 22-453. Then we had one in 22-474 resolution. But it shows you where they started, how they got started, that resolution would. And then there are some that are emergency purchases. So those were handled separately. There's another column that we're not showing on this. The other column is the actual contract agreement authorization, which is a subsequent resolution. But this is just representing the initiation of the projects. Anybody have any questions about the projects that are up there?
I have a lot of questions. I didn't know if it was appropriate to ask for it here or if we do it when we're doing the resolution, but as long as you have it up, if I could just ask a few.
Sure.
So I'll just go in order. So number 2, where you have the building management.
Yes.
What are some examples of what that would look like? Like, I have no idea what that even means.
So if we have a capital repair or replacement for air conditioner, heater,
Got it.
a boiler, a water heater, water softener, Henry had asked us in building management about having a budget for those specific capital
Okay.
improvements where we're replacing major piece of the
Okay.
infrastructure.
I kind of thought maybe that's
Yeah.
what it was, but I didn't.
I don't like the word miscellaneous.
Yeah.
So it's a building management, capital purchase.
Okay. All right. My next question was number 3 on the hybrid
Yes,
for IT.
yes.
Can you explain that?
So we have vehicles that IT uses to do service at the 7 different campuses or buildings. And those vehicles, one of them is a 2011-ish
Okay.
Ford Escape. And we were asked to submit it as a hybrid to try and get better fuel efficiency and economy for the replacement, but it's been scored out by I believe it was it KDOT or was it the police?
Yeah, sometimes the sheriff garage scores them and sometimes KDOT. I don't recall. who
Yeah, so
scored
they're
this one. It may have
scored
been
out
Gary.
to be replaced.
But it's a replacement.
Yeah, it's a replacement of a Ford Escape,
Oh,
like
that's
a
fine. I just-
2011.
I didn't know if it was addition.
Oh.
Number 9, is that Trendway? That we,
Is that what?
Trendway, when we did all of that, number 9 for the furniture?
So yeah, carpet and furniture, Trendway would post against that if we
Okay,
bought any
all right.
furniture. It would go against that project.
Okay, 15 on the stabilization,
Yes.
is so that's money we have automatically for it, and then
That-
whatever else we can find?
So the balance, that was a project initiated last year to do the study you just saw.
Right. Oh,
And
so that's already paid for.
They spent about 16,000, I think,
Okay.
of that. So the that's not the net balance. That's what the project budget was.
Okay, so we have
So
a little bit left over
But
from
there's
that?
Probably 10 or 15,000. I don't know. I imagine we have a invoice probably for today, but there's probably another final pay app that we would owe them. So it's somewhere between 16 and 30,000. But that's how we, in order to engage their services, we asked the board, do you want to do this study? And we want to budget an estimated $30,000 to do it.
Yeah.
And that gave Rob Linky and Jody Wolnick the green light to do the study.
I just wanted to know if there was a little bit of money in there.
A
that we
little
could-
bit.
Okay, that's
Yep.
great. And then my last one is number 23 on the state's attorney
Yes.
vehicles. Are those the ones we've already
Yes.
approved?
Those were done
So
by,
that's-
those are closing. They're done.
Okay, so anything under closing is.
Yep.
Okay, great.
We're getting
super.
final pay app for those. They're
Okay.
closing out and there's another representation of this that shows like the 12 months of pay apps and how much we've been paying per period. So when we're trying to do the pay apps, what we determined was generally nobody bills us more than once a month. So what we're going to do is show 12 months of pay apps and we'll be able to tell you when they post the pay app, how much, and then what the net balance is for the project. And it's a big spreadsheet. So we're trying to work on how to present that better.
Okay,
So
well, thank you.
Yep.
That's all on this one.
Okay.
On
yeah,
this
that's
one.
good. Yeah, okay.
Good.
And then we can move ahead and then you can ask more.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, I'm
Okay.
good. Thank you.
So I think that's the last slide that we had to present. And if you have any other questions about the budget, again, going back to the budget slides, I think that right now we're in a good position overall. Some of that is because the first 3 months overall, we had people that we're trying to hire and positions that we were trying to hire. So salaries that were not being paid out also help to, balance the maintenance work that is probably going to look like it's over by category or fund line. So that is a balancing effect. And so just the fact that we're at 33% of the year and 27% spent is probably due a lot to that effect. But other than that, I think financially at 6 months, we'll be able to get a better forecast for the approach to the end of the year. And we'll be working with finance on, what we need to do to try and come in under budget. So that's all we have.
Okay, any other questions for Roger? I should ask you, Mr. Young, are you okay with the response from the previous discussion that we had and the questions that you had? Sorry, I didn't follow up on that.
No, yeah, it's fine. I'm every minute of this process is a learning experience, so it's all good. Thank you.
Yeah, understand. Okay. Great, then we'll move on to building management and resolutions, is that correct?
We have the facility master plan is item 7.
Oh,
on there.
that's right.
We just
I'm
have a
sorry.
brief update.
Yes, sorry, Jason.
We have Jason Dwyer from White and Company. And I think the main event is this afternoon. So I don't want to spoil his thunder, but
Yeah, I'll be really brief. Heidi and I were going to tag team this, I guess, but I'll start out. Just really, I think we presented a committee of the whole recently and kind of walked through the whole process of what we're going to do today's kind of a major event, a major milestone. We're going to have a visiting session at Eagle Brook at 3 o'clock. And I think most board members are coming, hopefully. It sounds like we've got really good response to people that we invited. So really looking forward to that. This will be a great opportunity for everybody to share some initial thoughts. We're going to walk through a series of different exercises with a couple quick question answer polls, some post-it note exercises, some tabletop exercises, just to get everybody communicating, sharing their thoughts, and so we can collect all that and use that to help us guide as we move forward in the scenario planning.
Okay, any questions for? And then you're going to turn it, you have comments, Heidi?
I would just repeat what Jason said.
No need. We're already behind.
If you can get there a few minutes early, it'd help us get started on time too, other
There
than
you
that.
go. Okay, we'll see what we can do.
Cookies.
Okay.
Cookies. I don't know.
That is, you get to leave on time.
Yeah.
At work, and I'm just skipping
Cookies is
things
better.
right and left here in the agenda, so. All right, then on to resolutions now. So, yes,
Ready?
okay. We are at item A under billing management. May I have a motion and a second to authorize the number of procurement cards issued to building management in each of their transaction limits. Moved by Erman,
Ford second.
second by Ford. Mr. Fonstock, you want to
I
explain
think
what this?
we're gonna have Henry Thompson from Building Management do these
Henry?
resolutions.
Okay,
Good morning, Henry Thompson from Building Management. I think I have 5 items here. First being the first resolution is the list of procurement cards issued to building management staff and their limits.
so is there
You know,
any
Second.
questions for, you want to explain that one, and we're going to go not all at once, right? You're going to just do one at a time?
do one at a time.
Go one at a time.
Yeah.
That's fine. If that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Okay. This is just giving a list of the procurement cards listed for building management and their limits. We're by county ordinance required to give a yearly statement of users and their limits. So building management's recommending approval.
Okay, any questions for Henry? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Berman,
Herman, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
UBI.
Caius.
Guys, yes. Item B, may I have a motion and a second ratifying an emergency purchase affidavit to purchase a trash compactor for the King County Adult Correction Facility, moved by
Gums will move.
Gums, second by
Juby.
Juby. Henry?
All right, Henry.
Yes, this is the resolution ratifying the emergency purchase affidavit for the trash compactor that is going to be replaced at the adult jail. It's currently on order. We worked with purchasing. Went out and got 3 quotes. It was over the threshold, so we did ask purchasing if there was a group purchasing agreement that we can go off of. There was not. So we determined that the best route was the EPA. So this is a budget item not to exceed 50,000, and building management's recommending approval.
Yeah, this is the Adult Correction Facility. We want the garbage compacted, I believe.
Either
Now,
that or we have to haul it away somewhere.
Hey, any questions?
I
Madam
have some
Juby?
questions. So do we currently not have a trash compactor there? Or we have one that's not functioning 100% or what?
The one that was currently put in when the building was built, it was compromised. It was at the end of life. So it actually corroded from the bottom out. So liquids and garbage would be flowing out the bottom of the trash compactor.
Okay, so it's not working?
It's not working, and it's actually been removed because it was causing a mess on the pavement.
Okay, and when was that removed?
Probably about a month ago.
Okay, my question is, I'm having a problem with all these emergency authorizations. I mean, I've only been here since December, but I have approved a ton of these and
Sure.
I don't like them. And I don't understand why, if we're replacing something that we probably knew wasn't working, because we see, like when your water heater's leaking, you just don't shut the door, you're going to be down there. So I understand why we need it, but I would just not like to see these. I mean, and the one that's coming after this, I'm fine with. But this one, I just think that maybe we could have been a little more attentive to this this need where we could have gone through the proper procedures.
Fonz,
I-
a comment on?
To speak to that, I think that the building maintenance directors have been going through all the buildings and we're identifying lots of things. And then the determination is, do we have any mechanism in place where we could buy the replacement compactor? And if you don't, then the question is, do you have 90 days to do a process to competitively bid and procure it? Because that's the only other means that the county purchasing ordinance and the state code will allow you to buy a compactor or, you know, anything over $30,000. And it's a matter of the procurement code really is what mechanisms do you have? So the alternative would be to do a competitive bid process, put it out to bid, which is publicly advertised. We'd wait for the responses, make a decision, bring it back to admin. It would sit in committee for 31 days until it got approved by the county board. It would also have to go through the civil contract vetting, and that has taken a week or so. And then we would get the contract, have the chairman sign it, then we would order it. And we wouldn't order it until we get all that done.
And I think that's the
That's
process.
that's the challenge if you need a compactor sooner. So is it an emergency or not? That's kind of the question that we get asked. And if you talk to the sheriff's department, they would say that they need that to operate the jail because of the refuse and all the stuff, that's coming out of there. I don't know what other options we would have, but we would be open to listening. I mean,
I think, and I understand your frustration. I feel it as well, and I'm glad to be on this committee and the changes we've made with the committee.
yeah.
What we have had up to this point with past administrations is pretty much a deferred maintenance.
No, I
Just
understand.
So we don't
that.
catch them until the very end of their very life. What we're putting in place right now is a plan to monitor that so that we won't be caught as many times as we're being caught right now.
Yeah, ideally that wouldn't happen, but
Right, but it happens a lot. It happens a lot with vehicles. It happens, I mean, it's been happening a lot since I've been here. So if
Oh.
it turns out to be a procurement issue, then maybe we need to go back to that and see how we can address that, because procurement processes are put in place so things happen. And
Sure.
we're circumventing those processes. And I'm a rules person. I have a hard time with that.
if there were another procurement method, we would be happy to try and,
Well,
you
can
know,
we
we're-
try to find another, I mean, where do we go? Do we go to Illinois General Assembly to do procurement? Where do we go? I mean, who sets our law? If we
So-
set our law, should we change it?
that there is the state law, which defines the competitive procurement process and defines the thresholds at which we have to do the bids. There's also federal funding that determines that if we want to receive federal funding, like the micro purchase threshold and the threshold for that, you have to follow that or else you become ineligible for federal funding for certain things. And we changed the micro purchase threshold to $10,000 last year with the federal changes. That was a lot related to COVID. And that helped because now you can do a single quote for anything up to $10,000 and you can purchase it. $10,000 to $30,000, we're generally good to get 3 quotes and purchase it. It's the things that are over $30,000 that have to happen within, 30 to 45 days. Those are the things that are challenging. And that's kind of our pain point, is something that's over $30,000 needs to be done in an expedited way. The only way that we see within the ordinance that you could do that is through an emergency purchase affidavit, because otherwise you'd be lining it up for the standing committees, going through all of that, which we're willing to do. It would just mean you have to have an interim answer for the problem. So if it's the doors at the jail, which is one of the other, the vehicles, I would say that's probably the one that is maybe the most unusual. And a lot of that is a discussion that we had with purchasing and state's attorney's office. If you have vehicles that are on state contract or through a competitively procured process, but there's never vehicles available because they don't have inventory, how do we get a vehicle? And we were talking with them. They're like, well, by the time a vehicle shows up at a dealership and we get all the paperwork through county board in 45 days, the vehicle's gone. We can't buy it. So let's start again. And we've gone through this exercise. So we were asking them, what mechanism do we have to buy a vehicle when it shows up on the lot to get it for the county? And there just isn't a really good legislated or ordinance based way of doing that. So the recommendation was, and you have evidence of the state's attorney doing it themselves for an emergency purchase affidavit. The sheriff's cars, when the sheriff purchased the squad cars, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars in squad cars, and they existed on a particular dealer lot that was not the, particular contractor that was awarded to the state. So how do you do it? The only mechanism is the EPA, unfortunately. That's the only way to circumvent or to do the purchase directly without having all of those other elements in place. And we've been talking about this with the state's attorney's office. It certainly puts you in a dilemma. It's not a position we want to be in, but for us, we didn't have a pre-standing agreement with someone for trash compactors. We're trying to do that. This is, the same thing works for like the heating and air conditioning. So we do a master agreement for heating and air conditioning because the frequency of it, we know we're going to have a lot of heating and air conditioning with 30 buildings. We have one trash compactor, maybe two in the county. But it wasn't something that we had on a contract at the time. We could look at doing a bid to have that kind of a service. And we'd actually looked at whether or not, I think, Henry, you talked about having a service provider loan us one at one time, and the cost was actually not a good deal.
That was correct. The return on investment was better for us to buy the compactor than lease it.
The lease or borrowing, renting one was not a very good, I think it was like a year and we could have bought one. So.
Just a concern.
Yep.
Okay. Duly noted. Okay, so then we have any other questions for that? Then this would be ratifying the emergency purchase affidavit for the purchase of trash compactor. Roll call, please.
Yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
Yes.
Caius.
Yes.
Passes.
All right, may I entertain a motion to ratify an emergency purchase affidavit to purchase detention door services for the Kane County Correction Facilities. Moved by
Berman.
Moves.
Berman, second by Ford.
Yes, this is the resolution ratifying the EPA for the detention door services by door doctors. Building management had issues with doors being not secured at the jail and preventive maintenance that lacked through the years. We actually struggled with finding a vendor to service these doors. We worked with purchasing and we reached out to DuPage County and we were unable to find anyone else. So Door Doctors is the choice that we're using now. We actually had this on our list to have an open bid to. It's on our list of items to do. We have some other pressing items that we had to put out first. So we're actually working on it. This is a budgeted item, not to exceed 100,000. The building management recommends approval.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I have.
No,
another
you have
question.
the floor. You're the
Okay,
member
so
of the committee.
I understand.
Madam Juby.
It's emergency, that's fine. So this is for a 4-month period ending August 1st. What happens August 2nd?
We hope to have this put out to bid before that time comes.
So if you know now that this is good till August 1st, that means it's not coming back to us as an emergency purchase, correct? Because you have time?
That's
That's correct.
Okay. Holding you to that.
I'll make this the next item we do put out the bid.
Okay, I'm good.
Mr. Chairman, this is Roger again.
Mr. Fonstock.
One of the things I wanted to note, maybe for some of the actually most of the board members that may not be familiar with it, there was a period of time, maybe a year, almost 2 years ago, I think now, where the maintenance of the jail and the sheriff's buildings was changed. And the staff that was under building management that was charged with doing maintenance at the jail was relinquished and turned over to the sheriff's office where we moved the money back. I would tell you that the 5 positions that were moved back to the sheriff's control for the maintenance were very low end positions, not strategic, not designed to manage major systems, heating, air conditioning, control systems. They were, a junior level maintenance at best. And when we hired the new staff, which is Brent, and Matt Walker's not with us today, but Henry, it was go through the buildings, get them on preventative maintenance, understand what's not working, try to figure out how, and we're finding things like doors where they say, hey, this hasn't worked right in some time. It's a safety issue for us. Now you have Brent, Matt, Henry, they're trying, okay, how do we fix that and get that back into, working order? And I think that some of that history created some gaps in what, was done or not done. And now we have people, we're finding things in the parking lot where the stormwater is as well, things that need to be addressed. They're probably not as high end of emergency as, hey, keep the inmates in the jail, but it, for the sheriff, they express it as a safety concern, as a procedural issue for them, because now they have to always think about the door that doesn't shut or the door that doesn't lock. I don't believe we had invoices for $100,000 as of yet, but it was just to get an amount of money that we could authorize spending with these folks to do the work as these doors are not closing properly or not opening. And you're correct. Once we get a bid for a contractual service provider, that would take care of it. And you won't see this type of a EPA for the doors. But it'll become a part of our standard maintenance to take care of when they have a door issue. And I think the sheriff has supported this. They were alarmed and concerned. And at the same time, we're trying to work that out with the sheriff about who's maintaining what parts. And I think we've determined that the large mechanical systems have to be addressed by the building maintenance. And that's going to be another discussion at budget time, because we were going into maintenance with an understanding that had transitioned. And I think it's obvious that that's a different animal than what we started with. So you take a relatively large, high security jail that runs 24 hours a day. Now you're saying that's in addition to everything else, even though it was kind of parsed out to say that it was going to be handled differently. And we don't disagree with the sheriff. It just needs to be dealt with. We need to figure out what that strategy is, who's responsible for ordering services like this and contracting for these services. And I think that'll come through in the next budget cycle. You're going to see some changes related to that.
Well, for the record, I wasn't complaining about the emergency on this
Okay.
one.
Oh, no, it is though. It's a good question.
It's good background though, I think,
Yeah.
because that may,
I wanted to know you had enough.
Yeah.
time.
You'll see in last year's budget, there was, I think it was $400,000, 400 and some $1,000 in positions that were moved to the sheriff's budget because of that change. And now we're trying to decide who does what work, because we realize it's not really realistic what was done.
I think you said it at the time we did it anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other questions on item C, ratifying emergency purchase affidavit for detention door services? Hearing none, roll call, please.
We have 2 more.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
GBS.
Caius.
Guys, yes. Item D, may I have a motion and a second authorizing a contract amendment for Kane County Asbestos, Lead and Mold Consultant Services, moved by
Ford.
Ford, second by
Juby.
Juby.
So this 4th item is a resolution amending the contract with Midwest Environmental. This was originally approved last year. Building management found that there was not a dollar amount attached to it. So we wanted to make that change. So it is a budget item for 200,000 and building management recommends approval.
Budgeted up to 200,000. Any questions about that? Okay. Not hearing none, roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes. Item E, resolution, may have a motion and second to approve authorizing capital projects from the capital fund. Moved by
Berman,
Berman, second by
Ford.
Ford.
Oh.
And then that was the
think-
list that you showed us
Yes.
earlier, right?
This list should be
We need to have that shown again. or-
presentation.
That is correct. That's the list that was posted earlier.
Any questions about that? There you go. Numbers match 5, 2, 5, 7, 6, 8, 4, 2, 3. Okay. No questions? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
yes.
Caius.
Guys, yes. On to information technology. May I have a motion and a second authorizing number of procurement cards issued to the Information Technologies Department at each of their transaction limits. Moved by
Ford.
Ford, second by
Me.
Berman. And that is, are you doing IT, Charles? Lasky?
Charles Lasky from the IT department. So this is, again, as Henry mentioned, part of the new P card policy that we present these to the committee and get your consent and approval, and then it will go to finance. So we have some limits that are fairly high, and that is related to some purchases we have to do. Like on my P card, I had to do our Zoom account renewal, which was over 25,000 single purchase. So that is why we have some high single purchase limits. We do keep that amount at 29,000, so nobody can accidentally do a P card purchase that would go over the 30,000 that would be required for a bid. So we have that limit in place for that purpose. So we recommend approval for these, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Charles? Hearing none, seeing none? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Ford,
Yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
yes.
Caius.
Caius, yes. Item B, motion passes. Item B, may I have a motion and second authorizing contract extension for security cameras and building access control systems. Moved by Juby, second by
Berman,
Berman.
So this is an extension of a current contract we have with two providers that do our access control and camera systems. This is a budgeted amount. It is a large dollar amount, and part of that is because one of these companies is currently working on the camera system for the sheriff. So this amount has a larger amount in there in case there's other things needed with that. We do recommend approval with this. We've had good experience with both of these vendors, so we want to keep using them.
Okay, any questions for Charles?
Yes.
Me.
It's not about a dollar amount or anything. So there's on the service, they're saying that if there's an emergency call, they'll acknowledge the call in an hour. And then they're saying that they'll give you a 4-hour window for service on an emergency. And I noticed that we also had that same 4-hour window on our IG with NIU on our optics, our fiber optics. But why, if it's an emergency, why are we waiting 4 hours for them to come in? If our cameras are knocked out, or, I mean, is that like industry standard that we wait 4 hours?
So for most of our cameras that we have under this contract, we are happy with that 4-hour window. We could pay more to have a shorter window.
Oh, okay.
But for the cameras that are under this contract for us, like this building, if we had an issue with a camera in this building, it's not as critical that we get that camera up quickly. So if it's something that the committee would like us to look at reducing that time, we could, but there is an expense. And right now we didn't feel like the expense was justified for this cameras were.
That's okay. If there's no need, I just think that that's a long time to be without cameras in places where you need cameras.
Yeah, for the sheriff system, they'll have a separate contract and their emergency window may be shorter.
Okay.
But for the cameras we're managing in IT and building management, this window works well for us.
Thank
You,
you.
you have initial comment, Mr. Ponza?
I would just say that the price to get faster turnaround time for them to have a person here goes up exponentially, because essentially they have to have a person on standby waiting to come for us. If you call them and they dispatch, generally speaking, it's almost impossible for them to get here within an hour or two, just because of the dispatch timing of it. So you might get it down to 2-hour response time, but they do respond by phone pretty much on call. They have a 800 or on call number, and they'll start addressing it remotely if they can fix it. But to get a person physically out here, I think you could probably ask them for 2 hours, but I don't know what the price would be. I'd probably hate to see it.
Jump up considerably. Okay.
Well, no, I don't think 2 hours is much different from 4 hours in an
It's
emergency like
close,
that. So,
yeah.
yeah, thank you.
So any other questions? Okay, roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
GBS.
Caius.
Nice, yes. Item C, may I have a motion and a second authorizing an agreement with DocuSign for electronic signature software and services. Moved by
Gums will move.
Gums, second by
Ford.
So this is a continuation of our use of DocuSign. We implemented this during COVID. The courts use it quite a bit, and we started using it throughout other departments and offices in the county. This is something that's budgeted. It's also something that's been requested out of ARP funds. So if that's approved, there will be a reimbursement for this, but we haven't gotten to that point yet. But it is under the list of items we had for them to review and consider. So this is budgeted right now. It would be paid out of our IT fund and also out of the judicial fund. So we have funds that cover this, and we'd recommend approval.
Okay, saves a lot of time and paper passing back and forth,
Yes.
walking
all
office to office. Okay, great. Any questions? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
GBS.
Caius.
Yes, motion passes. I guess you say that, don't you?
It passes.
Okay. I have a motion and second authorizing an intergovernmental agreement relating to professional information technology services. Moved by
Gums will move.
Berman. Second by
Gums.
Gums.
So this is a request to enter into an intergovernmental agreement with NIU to provide them access to use 2 of our strands of dark fiber that would connect from our location at the Circuit Court over on Randall Road to SBA Data Center. This will be a 5-year agreement, and NIU would be paying a fee to cover the use of that, as well as yearly maintenance for any maintenance we may have on that fiber. So we would recommend approval. We think this is a good use of that fiber, will allow another governmental agency to use something that we don't have a need for right now. So we'd recommend approval.
Okay, and they'll be paying approximately 39,000 for the first year and then 15 for the next 4 years.
That is
Each-
correct.
Each of the next 4 years.
Yep.
Okay, any questions? Roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
GBS.
Caius.
Yes. That takes care of our resolutions. Nothing for Mill Creek SSA today
No, sir.
and no vehicles, emergency purchase, I guess, or other.
None.
Chris.
You want an emergency purchase for a vehicle?
You-
Okay.
No new business, old business, anything for the good of the committee? May have motion and second to place the reports on file.
Ford moves.
Ford,
Berman, second.
roll call, please.
Berman,
Berman, yes.
Ford,
Ford, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Young,
Young, yes.
Juby,
GBS.
Caius.
Yes. No
Okay.
need for executive session. May have a motion and a second to adjourn. Moved by
Berman.
Berman, second by,
Juby.
Young,
nobody else wants to get out of here. Mr. Young,
yes.
out of here. Go back to work. Thank you for attending. Thank you for all attending today
I can't.
and have a happy lunchtime. See you at 3 or before.